Sarah Martinez stepped out of her dusty pickup truck and grabbed her gear bag from the back seat. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Blackwater training facility, and she could already hear the distant sound of gunfire echoing from the various ranges. Today was the day she had been preparing for over the past 18 months. Today, she would finally prove that everyone who doubted her was dead wrong. The facility buzzed with activity as military contractors, law enforcement officers, and private security personnel moved between buildings. Sarah had driven 4 hours from her small hometown in Nevada to be here. She worked as a night shift security guard at a local casino, but her real passion lay in competitive shooting and tactical training. What most people didn't know was that Sarah had spent countless hours perfecting her skills with firearms, particularly full automatic weapons. Walking toward the registration building, Sarah noticed the stares and whispered conversations. She stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed maybe 115 pounds soaking wet. Her appearance often led people to make assumptions about her capabilities. She wore simple jeans, work boots, and a plain gray t-shirt. Nothing about her screamed tactical operator or weapons expert. That was exactly how she liked it. The registration desk was managed by a gruff ex-Marine named Thompson who looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "You sure you're in the right place, miss? This isn't a beginner's course. We're running advanced tactical scenarios today with full auto weapons and live ammunition." Sarah handed him her paperwork and credentials without saying a word. Thompson's eyebrows raised slightly as he read through her qualifications. She held instructor certifications in multiple disciplines and had completed advanced courses that many seasoned operators struggled with. Still, his expression remained doubtful. "Says here you want to participate in the 50-target elimination challenge," Thompson said, tapping the paper with his finger. "That's a timed event where you have to neutralize 50 hostile targets using only one 30-round magazine of full auto fire. Most guys need at least 3 attempts to even come close, and that's if they don't flame out completely on the first try." Sarah nodded calmly. "That's correct. I'd like to register for the challenge." Thompson shook his head slowly. "Look, lady, I don't want to discourage you, but this particular exercise has a 95% failure rate. These targets are spread across multiple elevations and distances. You've got moving obstacles, limited sight lines, and strict time constraints. The recoil from sustained full auto fire will throw off your aim faster than you can compensate. Most experienced shooters can't manage their muzzle climb effectively enough to stay on target." "I understand the requirements," Sarah replied quietly. "I've been training for this specific challenge." Other participants had begun gathering around a registration desk, drawn by the unusual sight of such a small woman signing up for one of the facility's most demanding courses. Sarah could feel their eyes on her and caught fragments of their conversations. "No way she can handle the kickback from a full auto rifle," one man muttered to his partner. "She'll probably get knocked flat on her back after the first burst. Somebody should warn her before she embarrasses herself." Another voice chimed in. "This isn't some weekend shooting club. People get hurt when they're in over their heads." A tall man in expensive tactical gear approached the desk. His name tag read Davidson, and he wore the confident demeanor of someone accustomed to being the most skilled person in any room. "Excuse me, miss, but are you absolutely certain you want to attempt this challenge? I've been shooting competitively for 15 years, and I barely passed it on my 4th try. The physical demands alone are enough to overwhelm most people." Sarah turned to face him directly. "Thank you for your concern, but I'm confident in my abilities." Davidson exchanged glances with several other men nearby. "The thing is, when you're firing full auto, especially with a rifle chambered in 7.62 NATO, the muzzle climb is incredibly aggressive. You need serious upper body strength and muscle memory to control it effectively. Most guys my size struggle with it, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but you're going to be fighting physics here." Thompson had been listening to the conversation and decided to add his own warning. "The lady seems determined, Davidson, but maybe you could explain what happened to the last person who overestimated their capabilities on this course." Davidson nodded seriously. 3 weeks ago, we had a police detective attempt this same challenge. Good shooter, lots of experience with handguns and semi-automatic rifles. He thought he could handle the transition to full auto without proper preparation. The sustained recoil torqued his rifle right out of his hands during the second magazine. Weapon went flying, he lost his footing, and ended up with a separated shoulder. Had to be taken to the hospital. Sarah listened patiently to their warnings, but her expression remained unchanged. She had heard similar doubts expressed throughout her entire shooting career. People consistently underestimated her based on her appearance, and she had long since stopped trying to convince them otherwise with words. "I appreciate everyone's concern," she said finally, "but I'd still like to proceed with the registration." Thompson sighed and stamped her paperwork. "Your funeral, lady. The range safety officer will brief you on the specific requirements and safety protocols. Course fee is $250, non-refundable regardless of whether you complete the challenge or not." Sarah handed him her credit card and waited while he processed the payment. Around her, the conversations continued in hushed tones. She caught references to inevitable disaster, and someone should record this for training purposes. The range safety officer, a serious woman named Rodriguez, approached with Sarah's target packet and range assignment. "You're scheduled for range 7 in 30 minutes. That give you time to inspect your weapon and ammunition, review the target layout, and ask any final questions. Have you ever fired this particular rifle platform before?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, I'm familiar with the FN SCAR-H system. I've trained extensively with it." Rodriguez looked surprised. Most people request the lighter 5.56 platform for this challenge. The 7.62 has significantly more recoil and muzzle flash. "Are you sure you want to stick with the heavier caliber?" "I'm sure," Sarah replied confidently. As they walked toward the equipment area, Rodriguez continued her briefing. "The targets are arranged in a three-dimensional array across approximately 200 meters of varied terrain. You'll have steel plates at distances ranging from 50 to 150 meters, with multiple elevation changes and partial cover scenarios. Some targets will be visible only from specific shooting positions, requiring you to move and adapt your firing stance quickly." They stopped at the weapons rack where a pristine FN SCAR-H rifle waited, along with a single 30-round magazine loaded with match-grade ammunition. The rifle was fitted with a red dot sight and tactical sling. Rodriguez handed Sarah eye and ear protection along with the weapon system. "You'll have exactly 90 seconds to engage all 50 targets," Rodriguez explained. "Timer starts when you pick up the rifle and ends when the last target falls or when time expires. You must fire only in full automatic mode, and you cannot reload. Miss too many targets, run out of ammunition, or exceed the time limit, and you fail the challenge." Sarah examined the rifle carefully, checking the safety mechanisms and sight alignment. The weapon felt familiar and comfortable in her hands despite its substantial weight. She had spent months training with an identical platform, learning to manage its recoil characteristics and muzzle behavior during sustained fire. "Any questions before we head to the range?" Rodriguez asked. "Just one," Sarah replied. "Are there any restrictions on shooting techniques or body positions?" Rodriguez shook her head. "As long as you maintain safe muzzle discipline and don't violate any basic range safety rules, you can use whatever techniques work best for you. Most people try to shoot from a standing position or prone, but the targets are positioned to make both approaches challenging." They walked together toward range 7, passing several other training areas where groups of operators practiced various tactical drills. Sarah noticed that word of her upcoming attempt had spread throughout the facility. Small clusters of instructors and students had begun migrating toward the observation area, overlooking her assigned range. Davidson caught up with them near the entrance to the range complex. "Listen, I don't want to keep bothering you, but I feel obligated to mention one more thing. When you're firing full auto, especially in a timed environment, it's easy to get tunnel vision and lose track of your ammunition count. Most people either burn through their entire magazine on the first few targets or try to conserve so much that they run out of time. Finding the right balance takes experience that can't be learned in a single session. Sarah appreciated his genuine concern, even though his assumptions about her experience level were incorrect. Thank you for the advice. I'll keep it in mind. As they entered the range area, Sarah could see the target array for the first time. 50 steel plates of various sizes were positioned throughout a complex terrain feature that included hills, valleys, and artificial structures designed to simulate urban combat environments. The targets range from large torso-sized plates at closer distances to smaller head-sized targets positioned at extreme angles and partially obscured by cover. Rodriguez led her to the starting position, a marked area with a clear view of only about half the total targets. The others would become visible only as Sarah moved through the course and changed her shooting positions. This is where you'll begin, Rodriguez explained. The timer will start when you shoulder the rifle and disengage the safety. From that moment, you have 90 seconds to neutralize all 50 targets. The electronic scoring system will track your hits automatically and signal when the challenge is complete. Sarah studied the visible targets carefully, mentally mapping the most efficient engagement sequence. She could see immediately that success would require not just accurate shooting, but strategic movement and careful ammunition management. The course designers had created a challenge that tested every aspect of tactical shooting skills. More spectators had gathered in the observation area, and Sarah could hear their ongoing commentary about her chances of success. The consensus seemed to be that she would likely injure herself or embarrass herself within the first few seconds of the attempt. Thompson's voice carried clearly from the observation deck. I give her maybe 15 seconds before she loses control of that rifle. The muzzle climb on sustained full auto is going to eat her alive. Rodriguez checked her stopwatch and looked at Sarah expectantly. Whenever you're ready, step up to the firing line and assume your starting position. Sarah took a deep breath and moved forward to the designated starting point. She shouldered the rifle and checked her sight picture one final time. Around her, the facility had grown quiet as everyone waited to see whether the small woman from Nevada would prove the doubters right or somehow surprise them all. The moment of truth had finally arrived. Sarah's months of secret preparation were about to be tested under the most challenging conditions she had ever faced. She placed her finger near the safety selector and prepared to demonstrate that skill and determination could overcome any physical disadvantage. Rodriguez raised her hand and called out to the observation area, "Range is hot." Beginning 50-target elimination challenge. She looked at Sarah one last time. "On your mark, begin." Sarah flipped the safety selector to full auto and immediately dropped into a modified shooting stance that nobody in the observation area had expected to see. Instead of the traditional standing or prone positions that most shooters attempted, she assumed a low, compact crouch that seemed perfectly suited to her smaller frame. Her left hand gripped the rifle's handguard with surprising firmness while her right hand maintained precise trigger control. The first burst erupted from the Scar H with thunderous intensity. 3 rounds fired in rapid succession, and 3 steel targets rang out as bullets found their marks with mechanical precision. Sarah's body absorbed the rifle's recoil through her legs and core, keeping the muzzle remarkably stable despite the weapon's aggressive kickback. "Holy shit," someone whispered from the observation deck. She actually hit something. Sarah was already moving before the echoes of her first burst had faded. She transitioned smoothly to her right, acquiring new targets that had been hidden from her original position. Another controlled burst, this time 4 rounds, and for more steel plates sang their metallic confirmation of hits. 7 targets down in the first 15 seconds. Davidson leaned forward against the observation railing, his earlier skepticism beginning to transform into something approaching amazement. "Look at her stance. I've never seen anyone control muzzle climb like that with a full auto rifle. She's using her entire body as a shock absorber." Sarah had discovered this technique during months of solitary practice at a private range owned by her uncle, a retired Special Forces operator who had initially been just as doubtful of her ambitions as everyone else. He had taught her that successful full-auto shooting wasn't about fighting the weapon's natural behavior, but about working with it. Her smaller stature, which everyone assumed was a disadvantage, actually allowed her to get lower and create a more stable firing platform than larger shooters could achieve. Moving again, Sarah flowed around a concrete barrier and engaged a cluster of targets positioned on an elevated platform. The targets were angled to simulate enemy combatants firing from behind cover. Most shooters struggled with these particular plates because the shooting angle required precise muzzle control to avoid hitting the barrier itself. Sarah's solution was elegant and effective. She used a series of short, controlled bursts while moving laterally, essentially painting the targets from left to right with devastating accuracy. 5 more targets fell in quick succession, the sound of impacts blending together into a rapid drumbeat of success. 45 seconds elapsed, Rodriguez called out, her voice carrying a note of surprise. 21 targets remaining. The spectators had fallen completely silent. What they were witnessing defied everything they thought they knew about full-automatic rifle shooting. Sarah's ammunition management was flawless. She was averaging exactly 1.4 rounds per target, leaving her with enough ammunition to complete the challenge even if she encountered difficulties with the remaining plates. Thompson found his voice first. This is impossible. Nobody shoots full auto that accurately. She's got to be getting lucky. But luck had nothing to do with what was happening on the range below. Sarah had spent 18 months preparing for this exact moment, studying videos of the course layout, practicing with identical target arrangements, and developing muscle memory that allowed her to maintain perfect control even under stress. The next section of the course presented the most challenging targets yet. 8 steel plates were positioned behind a maze of barriers that required the shooter to engage them from multiple angles while moving quickly between firing positions. Most participants either wasted ammunition on impossible shots or lost precious time trying to find perfect angles that didn't exist. Sarah approached this section differently than anyone had before. Instead of treating each target as a separate challenge, she visualized the entire sequence as a flowing dance that would carry her through the maze in the most efficient pattern possible. She began moving before she fired, transitioning from position to position with fluid grace while delivering precisely aimed bursts at exactly the right moments. The first target fell as she rounded the initial barrier. The second dropped as she crossed behind cover. By the time she emerged from the maze, all 8 targets had been neutralized with only 11 rounds expended. Her movement had been so smooth that she never fully stopped walking during the entire sequence. 60 seconds elapsed, Rodriguez announced, her professional composure beginning to crack. 13 targets remaining. Davidson was shaking his head in disbelief. She's not even breathing hard. Look at her. She's completely calm and controlled. I've never seen anything like this. The final section of the course contained the most difficult targets of all. These steel plates were positioned at maximum distance and partially obscured by environmental obstacles designed to test the limits of both the rifle's accuracy and the shooter's skill. The plates were smaller than those in previous sections, and several were positioned at angles that made clean hits extremely challenging. Sarah paused for the first time since the challenge began, taking 3 seconds to assess the remaining targets and calculate her final approach. She had 14 rounds remaining in her magazine and 13 targets to neutralize. The margin for error was razor thin, but she had planned for exactly this scenario. Moving to an elevated position that provided sight lines to multiple targets, Sarah shifted her shooting technique once more. The distant targets required more precise shot placement, so she adjusted her burst length from 3 or 4 rounds down to careful 2-round pairs. The trade-off was slower target engagement, but dramatically improved accuracy at extended range. Her first pair of shots rang out, and 2 distant targets responded with the distinctive ping of solid hits. Sarah traversed smoothly to acquire the next pair, her movements economical and purposeful. 2 more targets fell. 75 seconds elapsed, Rodriguez called out, tension evident in her voice. 9 targets remaining. The crowd in the observation area was completely captivated. Word had spread throughout the entire facility, and shooting instructors had abandoned their classes to witness what was unfolding on Range 7. Even hardened veterans who had seen thousands of students attempt various challenges were staring in amazement at Sarah's performance. Sarah continued her methodical engagement of the remaining targets. Each shot was deliberate and controlled, with no wasted motion or unnecessary ammunition expenditure. Her breathing remained steady, her grip firm but not tense. She had entered the zone that every competitive shooter knows, that perfect mental state where conscious thought disappears and muscle memory takes complete control. 2 more targets fell to precisely aimed pairs. Then 2 more. Sarah was down to her final 5 rounds with 5 targets remaining. The mathematics were perfect, but she still had to execute flawlessly under the pressure of a rapidly approaching time deadline. 85 seconds elapsed. Rodriguez announced. 5 targets remaining. The final 5 targets were positioned in a line at maximum distance, each one slightly higher than the last, like steps leading up a hill. Sarah had studied this particular arrangement extensively during her preparation. She knew that most shooters tried to engage these targets from a stationary position, fighting against the rifle's natural tendency to climb with each shot. Instead, Sarah began moving again, using the weapon's muzzle climb as an advantage rather than an obstacle. She fired her first shot at the lowest target while moving upward along the slope. As the rifle's recoil lifted the muzzle, she rode that motion to acquire the second target naturally. The technique required perfect timing and coordination, but it allowed her to engage all 5 targets in rapid succession without fighting the weapon's natural behavior. The first target rang. The second. The third. The fourth. Sarah's final round fired just as Rodriguez called out. 90 seconds. The last steel plate, positioned at the top of the artificial hill at maximum distance, seemed to hang in the air for an impossibly long moment. Then it rang out clearly, the sound carrying across the range like a bell announcing victory. The electronic scoring system activated, its mechanical voice cutting through the stunned silence. Challenge complete. All 50 targets neutralized. Time, 89.4 seconds. Ammunition expended, 30 rounds. Score, perfect. For several seconds, nobody moved or spoke. The silence stretched on as the implications of what they had just witnessed began to sink in. Sarah had not only completed one of the most challenging tactical shooting tests in existence, she had done it flawlessly, using every single round to maximum effect, while finishing with 0.6 of a second to spare. Rodriguez was the first to find her voice. That was incredible. In 5 years of administering this challenge, I have never seen a perfect score. Most people consider a 70% hit rate to be excellent performance. Sarah safed her rifle and began walking back toward the starting position, her expression calm and satisfied but not surprised. She had trained for this moment for 18 months, and everything had gone exactly according to plan. The observation area erupted into conversations as spectators tried to process what they had witnessed. Thompson was staring at his clipboard as if it might explain what had just happened. Davidson was already climbing down from the observation deck, clearly intent on speaking with Sarah directly. As Sarah approached the equipment return area, she could hear fragments of the discussion swirling around her. Did you see how she controlled the muzzle climb? That movement technique was unlike anything I've learned. She made it look effortless. Where did she train? Who taught her to shoot like that? Rodriguez caught up with Sarah at the equipment table. I have to ask, where did you develop those techniques? Your approach to full auto shooting is completely different from anything we teach here. Sarah smiled for the first time since arriving at the facility. My uncle helped me understand that size isn't always a disadvantage if you know how to use it properly. I spent a lot of time learning to work with a weapon instead of fighting against it. Davidson arrived just in time to hear her explanation. His earlier condescension had been completely replaced by genuine respect and curiosity. Would you be willing to demonstrate some of those techniques to other shooters? I think a lot of people could benefit from seeing your approach. Sarah considered the request while she cleaned and returned the rifle to Rodriguez. The morning had proven everything she had hoped to prove. She had silenced the doubters and demonstrated that skill and preparation could overcome any perceived physical disadvantage. But more importantly, she had opened the door to new possibilities. The shooting community's reaction to her performance suggested that her techniques might have broader applications than she had originally considered. Word of Sarah's perfect performance spread through the Blackwater training facility like wildfire. Within an hour, her achievement had become the sole topic of conversation among instructors and students alike. Phone calls were being made to colleagues at other training centers, and several people were already uploading cell phone videos to social media platforms. Sarah found herself surrounded by a growing crowd of shooters, instructors, and facility staff members who peppered her with questions about her background and training methods. The same people who had been warning her about the dangers of the challenge just hours earlier were now eager to learn from her expertise. "The thing I don't understand," Thompson said, having abandoned his earlier skepticism entirely, "is how you manage the ammunition count so precisely. Most people either burn through their entire magazine on the first section or end up short when they reach the final targets." Sarah accepted a bottle of water from Rodriguez and took a moment to gather her thoughts. "I spent months studying videos of this specific course layout. I knew exactly how many targets would be in each section and calculated the most efficient ammunition allocation for each phase of the challenge." Davidson nodded thoughtfully. "But knowing the math is one thing. Actually executing it under pressure is completely different. Your shot discipline was incredible. I never saw you fire an unnecessary round." "That comes from practice," Sarah replied. "I set up identical target arrays at a private range and ran through the sequence hundreds of times. Eventually, the ammunition management became automatic." A shooting instructor named Collins approached the group with a tablet computer in his hands. "Sarah, I've been reviewing the electronic scoring data from your run. The system tracked not just your hits, but also your movement patterns and timing. Your target acquisition speed was consistently faster than anything in our database." Sarah looked at the data on Collins's screen with interest. The electronic system had recorded her complete performance in remarkable detail, showing the precise timing of each shot and the exact path she had taken through the course. "Look at this," Collins continued, pointing to a graph on the tablet. "Your transition time between targets averaged just under 2 seconds. Most shooters take 4 to 6 seconds for the same movements. How did you develop that kind of speed?" "Small size has advantages," Sarah explained. "I can change direction faster than larger people, and I don't need as much time to settle into stable shooting positions. But the key was learning to move while shooting instead of moving then shooting." Rodriguez had been studying the data as well. "This movement while shooting technique you used, I've never seen anything like it taught in any formal curriculum. Did you develop it yourself?" Sarah shook her head. "My uncle introduced me to the concept, but it took months of experimentation to make it work effectively. The idea is to use the weapon's natural recoil patterns to help with target transitions instead of fighting against them." The crowd around Sarah continued to grow as more people finished their scheduled training sessions and came to investigate the commotion. Several facility instructors had gathered to discuss the implications of Sarah's techniques for their own teaching methods. "We need to completely rethink how we approach full auto instruction," one instructor commented to his colleague. "Everything we've been teaching assumes the shooter will be fighting against muzzle climb and recoil, but she's demonstrated that you can actually use those forces to your advantage." Thompson had been unusually quiet since reviewing the scoring data. Finally, he spoke up with obvious reluctance. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on your appearance, and I was completely wrong. Your performance today was the most impressive display of tactical shooting I've witnessed in 20 years of running this facility." Sarah accepted his apology graciously. "I understand why you were concerned. Most people have never seen techniques like these because they're not taught in standard training programs. I don't blame anyone for being skeptical." Davidson cleared his throat and addressed the group. I think we're all wondering the same thing. Sarah, would you be willing to stay for the rest of the day and demonstrate your techniques to other shooters? I know several people who could benefit tremendously from seeing your approach. Before Sarah could respond, Collins interjected with additional information. Actually, there's something else you should all know. I've been checking our records, and Sarah's performance today didn't just set a new facility record. It appears to be the fastest perfect score ever documented at any training center in the country. The revelation sent a murmur of excitement through the gathered crowd. Several people immediately began making phone calls to contacts at other facilities to verify Collins's claim. Sarah felt a mix of pride and apprehension at the attention her achievement was generating. She had come to Blackwater simply to prove her capabilities to herself and silence the local doubters who had dismissed her shooting ambitions. She hadn't anticipated becoming the center of industry-wide attention. "I'm willing to share what I've learned," Sarah said finally. "But I should mention that these techniques work well for my body type and shooting style. They might not be directly applicable to everyone." Rodriguez looked thoughtful. "Even if the specific techniques don't transfer perfectly, the underlying principles could revolutionize how we approach full auto instruction. The idea of working with a weapon instead of fighting, it could benefit shooters of all sizes." A new voice joined the conversation as Facility Director Marcus Webb approached the group. Webb was a legendary figure in the tactical training community, a former Delta Force operator who had established Blackwater as one of the premier shooting schools in the country. His presence immediately commanded respect from everyone present. "I've been watching the footage of your performance," Webb told Sarah without preamble. "In 30 years of military and contract work, I've never seen anything quite like what you accomplished today. Your technique is completely unorthodox, but the results speak for themselves." Sarah felt a moment of nervousness at being addressed by such a respected figure in the tactical community. "Thank you, sir. I've heard a lot about your reputation and the quality of training here." Webb smiled slightly. "I'm more interested in your reputation after today. Collins tells me you've potentially set a national record. But beyond the statistics, your approach challenges some fundamental assumptions about tactical shooting instruction." The facility director gestured toward the range where Sarah had just completed her record-setting performance. "Would you be willing to run through the challenge one more time? I'd like to film it properly for analysis and potentially for instructional purposes. We could also set up additional monitoring equipment to gather more detailed data about your techniques." Sarah considered the request carefully. She was confident that her first performance hadn't been a fluke. Her preparation had been too thorough for that. But repeating the challenge would put additional pressure on her and risk diminishing the impact of her initial success. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But I'd like to make one request. If you're going to film it for instructional use, I'd appreciate being involved in the development of any training materials that result from this." Webb nodded approvingly. "That's more than fair. In fact, I'd like to discuss the possibility of you joining our instructor staff. We could use someone who brings a completely fresh perspective to tactical shooting education." The offer caught Sarah completely off guard. She had never considered the possibility of becoming a professional shooting instructor. Her day job as a casino security guard paid the bills, but it didn't provide the kind of professional satisfaction she craved. "I need to think about something like that," Sarah replied. "But I'm definitely interested in exploring the possibility." Thompson had been listening to the conversation with growing enthusiasm. "Sarah, if you do decide to pursue instruction, I hope you'll consider developing a specific program around your ammunition management techniques. The precision of your round count today was as impressive as your accuracy." Collins looked up from his tablet with additional data. "Speaking of precision, I've been analyzing the timing of Sarah's shots. Her consistency is remarkable. The interval between shots varied by less than half a second throughout the entire 90-second sequence. That kind of rhythm is typically only seen in top-level competitive shooters." Davidson seized on Collins's observation. "That raises an interesting question, Sarah. Do you compete in any formal shooting sports?" Your performance suggests you might have success in precision rifle competitions or tactical matches. Sarah shook her head. I've always focused on skill development rather than competition. But after today, I might be more open to exploring competitive opportunities. Webb clapped his hands together decisively. All right, let's set up for the second run. I want to capture every detail of Sarah's technique so we can study it properly. Rodriguez, please coordinate with the range safety team to clear range 7 again. Collins, work with the technical staff to position additional cameras and monitoring equipment. As the group began dispersing to prepare for the second demonstration, several people approached Sarah individually to express their admiration and ask specific questions about her training methods. A young police officer named Mitchell pulled her aside. Sarah, I've been struggling with full auto qualifications for months. My department requires us to pass a similar challenge, but I can never seem to control the muzzle climb effectively. Do you have any advice for someone just starting to learn these techniques? Sarah appreciated his honesty and genuine desire to improve. The most important thing is understanding that size and strength aren't the determining factors in full auto shooting. Technique and body mechanics matter more than raw power. Start by practicing your stance and grip with an unloaded weapon until the positions become natural. Mitchell nodded eagerly and took notes as Sarah continued. Focus on using your entire body as a shock absorption system rather than trying to muscle the weapon into submission. And practice your movement patterns extensively. You need to be able to transition between targets smoothly while maintaining perfect muzzle discipline. As Sarah provided guidance to Mitchell and several other interested shooters, she began to recognize that her unconventional techniques might indeed have broader applications than she had originally considered. The enthusiastic response from experienced instructors and operators suggested that her approach could influence tactical shooting instruction throughout the industry. The prospect was both exciting and daunting. Sarah had come to Blackwater to prove herself on a personal level, but she was quickly discovering that her achievement might have implications far beyond her individual goals. 2 hours later, Sarah stood once again at the starting position on range 7, but this time the circumstances were dramatically different. Professional cameras had been positioned at multiple angles to capture her movement patterns and shooting techniques in detail. Electronic sensors monitored everything from her heart rate to the precise angle of her rifle at each moment during the challenge. Webb stood in the observation area alongside a team of analysts and instructors who would study every aspect of her performance. The casual crowd of earlier had been replaced by serious professionals who understood they were witnessing something potentially revolutionary in tactical shooting instruction. This second run is purely for analysis, Webb announced over the range communication system. Sarah, take your time and execute exactly as you did before. We want to document your natural technique without any artificial pressure. Sarah nodded and shouldered the rifle. She felt more relaxed than during her first attempt, knowing that she had already proven her capabilities beyond any doubt. This time, her focus was on demonstrating her techniques clearly so that others could learn from her approach. Rodriguez raised her hand. Range is hot. Beginning documentation run. Sarah began her sequence with the same fluid grace she had displayed earlier, but now the watching experts could observe and analyze every detail of her movement. Her modified shooting stance immediately drew comments from the instruction team as they recognized techniques that challenged conventional tactical shooting wisdom. Look at how she uses her lower body, one instructor observed quietly. She's creating a stable platform by dropping her center of gravity, but she's not sacrificing mobility like traditional prone shooting would. Sarah flowed through the first section of targets with mechanical precision, each shot placement deliberate and efficient. The cameras capture her unique method of transitioning between targets while maintaining continuous motion, never fully stopping to acquire each new aim point. Incredible, Webb muttered as he watched Sarah navigate the barrier maze with the same elegant efficiency she had demonstrated earlier. She's treating the entire course as a single flowing movement rather than a series of discrete shooting problems. The second run proceeded flawlessly, confirming that Sarah's first performance had been the result of systematic preparation rather than exceptional luck. Her shot timing remained consistent, her ammunition management stayed precise, and her movement patterns showed no variation from her earlier demonstration. When the final target fell and the electronic system confirmed another perfect score, the observation area erupted in applause. Even the most experienced instructors were clearly impressed by Sarah's ability to replicate such an exceptional performance under increased scrutiny. Webb descended to the range level immediately after Sarah safed her weapon. Outstanding. The consistency between your two runs proves that your techniques are repeatable and systematic rather than intuitive. That's exactly what we need for instructional development. Collins approached with preliminary data from the enhanced monitoring equipment. Sarah, the biomechanical analysis is fascinating. Your shooting stance distributes recoil forces across your entire skeletal structure in a way that's completely different from standard techniques. You're actually absorbing more energy than larger shooters because of your body positioning. Sarah was intrigued by the scientific analysis of her methods. I developed the stance through trial and error, but I never understood the physics behind why it worked so well. That's often how the best innovations develop, Webb observed. Practical solutions that work effectively even before we understand all the underlying principles. But now that we can analyze and document your techniques, we can potentially teach them to others systematically. Davidson had been studying the camera footage on a portable monitor. Sarah, there's something else remarkable about your approach. Most shooters experience degraded accuracy as they fatigue during sustained fire, but your shot placement actually improved slightly during the later phases of each run. Sarah considered his observation. I think that's because the movement patterns help maintain blood flow and prevent the muscle tension that usually builds up during static shooting positions. The constant motion keeps me loose and responsive. Rodriguez joined the discussion with additional insights. The safety implications of your techniques are significant too. Your muzzle discipline remained perfect throughout both runs, even during complex movement sequences. That suggests your approach might actually be safer than traditional methods. Webb looked thoughtful. Sarah, I'd like to make you a formal offer. Blackwater would like to hire you as a senior instructor with the specific mission of developing a new curriculum based on your techniques. We'd start with a pilot program for selected students and expand based on the results. The offer represented a complete transformation of Sarah's professional prospects. Just that morning, she had been a part-time security guard whose shooting abilities were dismissed by most people who met her. Now she was being offered a position as a senior instructor at one of the country's most prestigious tactical training facilities. What would that involve exactly? Sarah asked, wanting to understand the full scope of the opportunity. We want you to develop a comprehensive training program that teaches your movement-based shooting techniques, Webb explained. That would include curriculum development, instructor training, and direct student instruction. You'd also work with our research team to document and refine the methodologies. Collins added practical details. We provide full support for equipment, range time, and student resources. You'd also have access to our video production facilities to create training materials. The goal would be to establish a new standard for full auto instruction based on your innovations. Thompson, who had been listening quietly to the discussion, finally spoke up. Sarah, I've been teaching tactical shooting for 15 years, and I've never seen techniques with this much potential to change how we approach the subject. If you're willing to share your knowledge, you could influence an entire generation of shooters. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the opportunity being presented to her. She had always been passionate about shooting and training, but she had never imagined that her personal techniques might have such broad applications. I need some time to consider everything, she said finally. This is much bigger than anything I had anticipated when I drove here this morning. Webb nodded understandingly. Take all the time you need, but I hope you'll seriously consider the offer. Your techniques could revolutionize tactical shooting instruction, but only if you're willing to share them with a broader community. As the group began to disperse, several individuals approached Sarah with personal requests for additional guidance and training opportunities. Mitchell, the police officer who had spoken with her earlier, was particularly enthusiastic about the possibility of learning her techniques more systematically. "Sarah, if you do decide to become an instructor here, I'd like to be one of your first students," Mitchell said earnestly. "My department would probably send several officers to train with you if we could get access to your program." Similar requests came from private security contractors, competitive shooters, and even other instructors who recognized the value of expanding their own skill sets. Sarah realized that her achievement had created demand for training that simply didn't exist anywhere else. Rodriguez approached with Sarah's completion certificate and scoring documentation. "These are yours to keep. The perfect score is officially verified and will be submitted to the national database. Congratulations on setting a new standard for tactical shooting excellence." As Sarah prepared to leave the facility, Webb made one final comment. "Sarah, regardless of what you decide about the instructor position, today has been remarkable. You've proven that innovation and dedication can overcome any perceived disadvantage. That's a lesson worth sharing with others." During the drive home to Nevada, Sarah reflected on the dramatic changes that a single day had brought to her life. She had achieved her original goal of proving her capabilities, but she had also discovered opportunities she had never considered possible. The decision about whether to accept Webb's offer would require careful consideration of many factors, but Sarah felt confident that whatever path she chose, she would continue to challenge assumptions and push the boundaries of what was considered possible in tactical shooting. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from fellow shooters who had heard about her record-setting performance through social media and word-of-mouth communication. The shooting community was small and tightly connected, and news of exceptional achievements spread quickly throughout the network. By the time Sarah reached home, she had received inquiries from 3 other training facilities, 2 equipment manufacturers who wanted to discuss sponsorship opportunities, and a documentary filmmaker who hoped to feature her story in an upcoming project about women in tactical shooting sports. The small woman who had been dismissed and doubted just that morning was now being recognized as a potential game-changer in the tactical shooting world. Sarah smiled as she parked her truck and gathered her gear. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of deciding how to use her newfound influence and opportunities. But tonight, she would simply enjoy the satisfaction of having proven that skill, preparation, and determination could overcome any obstacle. The doubters had been silenced, the records had been broken, and new possibilities had emerged that would shape the next chapter of her journey. Sarah Martinez had set out to prove herself at the Blackwater training facility. Instead, she had proven that the entire tactical shooting community might need to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about what was possible when conventional wisdom was challenged by innovative thinking and exceptional execution. The revolution in tactical shooting instruction was about to begin, and Sarah would be at the center of it all.